Emmanuel. Our God is with us, beggars and kings. Let us come and adore him, rest in his peace, and bow before him. Sing, all ye people, the Lord Almighty reigns. Sing, every creature of God, come bless his name. For he is good, for he is good. He was born to conquer the grave. Light of the world, the reason for Christmas Day. Stars we have seen over deserts and oceans. Darkness was deep, but never hopeless. Redemption came, and the name is Jesus. Sing, all ye people, the Lord Almighty reigns. Sing, every creature of God, come bless his name. For he is good, for he is good. He was born to conquer the grave. Light of the world, the reason for Christmas Day. Christmas Day. On the mountains we will shout it out, for our Lord, our God Almighty reigns. He is with us now. For the Lord, our God Almighty reigns. From the mountains we will shout it out, for the Lord, our God Almighty reigns. He is with us now. For the Lord, our God Almighty reigns. Sing, all ye people, the Lord Almighty reigns. Sing, every creature of God, come bless his name. For he is good, for he is good. He was born to conquer the grave. Light of the world, the reason for Christmas. Sing, all ye people, the Lord Almighty reigns. Oh, sing, every creature of God, come bless his name. Oh, for he is good, for he is good. He was born to conquer the grave. Light of the world, the reason for Christmas Day. Light of the world, the reason for Christmas Day. Christmas Day.
How's that? Better. Good morning, EAC church family. I'm Clark Seeley, and I'm one of the elders here at the church. So privileged to serve alongside of all of you as we serve the Lord. This morning, I want to make you aware of an important tradition that we have at EAC in this time and season of giving, when God gave humanity the greatest gift that he could ever give to us, Jesus. We also want to think about giving, and in this way in particular, our tradition is that we give a gift of our hearts to our staff. One of the joys of serving as an elder at EAC is being able to serve alongside and work alongside our staff. And as most of you know, We have an amazing staff here at EAC. I know that you all thank them for what they do often, and that's wonderful. But our tradition during December is to make that a little bit more tangible. And we do that by what we call a love offering. And for the next several weeks, if you want to take the opportunity to take one of the envelopes that's in the seat back in front of you, you can use this envelope to make a little love offering for all of staff. You can also do it online. We have the online giving ability to do that as well. So on behalf of the elders and the governing board and the staff, just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Clark, and good morning again, everyone. It is the second Sunday in Advent, and so we're going to have another family come up and read for us and help us to reflect a little bit on the second candle of peace. Let me introduce the Abdalians. So we have Nate, Sandra, Michaela, and Isaac here this morning.
Good morning. Jesus is the Prince of Peace, and at Advent, we light the candles to remind ourselves of the light of hope and the promise of peace he brought to a world ravaged by sin. But what is peace? Peace is the end of hostility and fighting. It's when all is as it should be. It's harmony, it's rightness, and it's wholeness. It's shalom.
These candles represent hope and peace. When Jesus came, he brought peace between God and humanity. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government, of his peace, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness, from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. Isaiah 9, 6-7.
As you continue with your week, we encourage you to think about these questions. Why is it so hard to keep the peace? How can we know that Jesus came to bring peace between us and God, change the way we see and care for one another? What are some ways that we can be peacemakers this week?
Okay, if you can bow your heads, let's pray. O Lord, our God and our peace, thank you for sending Jesus to make everything right with us. We're grateful for the peace that comes through knowing him. Help us to live like your children who are called peacemakers in a broken world. Help us to be yours as we wait for you to come again. We love you. Amen.
Thank you guys very much. Would you stand up with us now? Let's sing a couple carols together. Angels, we have heard on high. Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply echo The first Noel, the angel didn't say, were the angels. And shepherds in the fields. Sing it with us. The first Noel, the angels did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. They looked up and saw a star shining in the east, beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. This star drew nigh to the northwest, over Bethlehem it took its rest, and there it did, oh, stop and stay, right over the place where Jesus lay. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King. Born is the King of Israel. You may be seated. If you've been around EAC for more than a year or two or 8 or 9, you've probably heard this song. I feel like Bob, we're on tour. We've done this song like so many times, but I asked Bob to sing this song year after year, and I want to make a disclaimer that some of you might come up to Bob afterwards and go, Bob, don't you know any other Christmas songs than this one song? And it's not Bob's fault, because he did pitch me another song this year, and I listened to it. It's a good song, but this is a great song. And I do get paid to do that, I guess, make that decision. But anyway, I just thought that it's such a great song. And certainly before we experience communion this morning at Christmas time, which is kind of a unique thing to do, because it asks a question. Communion is about one thing. It is about remembering. Jesus didn't say, I want you to do this. This is a tradition that you get tired of doing. I don't want you to do this to take up some time in your services and so the priest can make money doing this. I want you to do this for one reason, that is to remember. Remember what I did. And this song, I think, does that so wonderfully because it asks us all a question. How many kings have left their thrones for you? How many fathers have given up their sons for you? And this song gives a great answer. Only one.
Follow the star to a place unexpected. Would you believe after all we projected? A child in a manger, lowly and small, the weakest of all, unlikeliest hero, wrapped in his mother's shawl, just a child. Is this who we've waited for? 'Cause how many kings step down from their thrones? How many lords have abandoned their homes? How many greats have become the least for me? And how many gods have poured out their hearts to romance a world that is torn all apart? How many fathers gave up their sons for me? Bringing our gifts for the newborn Savior, all that we have, whether costly or meek, because we believe. Gold for his honor and frankincense for his pleasure, and myrrh for the cross he'll suffer. Do you believe? Is this who we've waited for? It's who we waited for. 'Cause how many kings step down from their thrones? How many lords have abandoned their homes? How many greats have become the least for me? And how many gods have poured out their hearts to romance a world that is torn all apart? How many fathers gave up their sons for me? Only one did that for me. All for me. All for me.
All for me.
All for you.
All for you.
All for me.
All for me.
All for you. All for me. All for you. All for me. All for you. How many kings step down from their thrones? How many lords have abandoned their homes? How many greats have become the least? And how many gods have poured out their hearts to romance a world that is torn all apart? How many fathers gave up their sons for me? Only one did that for me. All for me. All for you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Marlon Atherin. I'm a member of the leadership team here at Edgewater Alliance Church. And as you can tell, I'm a little high maintenance, no pun intended. There we go. Okay, welcome to Edgewater Alliance Church's communion service. At Edgewater Alliance, we do this first Sunday of every month. To participate in the communion here at Edgewater Alliance Church, you need only be a believer in Jesus Christ. You do not need to be a member. So I was preparing to do this communion service this week. I was reminded of a little nugget, and I'll throw out there. Later on in the service, or in the communion, you'll hear that Jesus broke bread and gave it to his disciples, and he said, "This is my body." And in the book of John 6:35, right after feeding the 5,000, Jesus tells his disciples, "I am the bread of life." And in this Advent season, we're reminded that he was born in the town of Bethlehem, which in Hebrew literally means house of bread. So I'd like to invite the ushers forward, and they can go to their stations and hand out the elements. And while they do that, I would encourage the congregation to take a time and reflect, pray, and get your heart right for communion.
Jesus, I've forgotten the words that you have spoken, promises that burned within my heart have now grown dim. With a doubting heart I follow the paths of earthly wisdom. Forgive me for my unbelief, renew the fire again. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy on me.
this time, I'll go ahead and read from Matthew 26 through 29. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." I'll conclude with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, it is important that I adhere to what your word says about the Last Supper. I have taken the bread and the cup, and I will do so until Jesus comes again. I am forever grateful for the hope that has been given me through your sacrifice and his resurrection. Thank you for communion. Thank you that I am in a relationship with you through him. My sins have been washed. I am now a child of God. Amen.
Thank you, Marlon. Well, morning, church family. It's good to be with you today. We are finishing our series on the Sermon on the Mount. It's actually coming to a close, and we've made it. And one of the ways that we like to conclude a series here at Edgewater Alliance Church is to give you all the opportunity to interact with what we've been talking about. And so next week, here's the plan, that we're going to gather as usual, but the sermon time, Lord willing, will consist of questions from you all. And so if you have any questions related to any subject that we've covered in the Sermon on the Mount, please email them to questions@edgewateralliance.org. You can feel free to do that now, even as I'm talking, all right? Just please get those questions into me by Tuesday, because Wednesday is my primary sermon prep day, and I want to have time to be able to work through your questions. So get those in and participate in that discussion. I said this last week, I'll say it again. We're not going to put your name on the screen, all right? So don't feel anxious like, hey, was this a dumb question? Just send it in, all right? And let's talk through as many of those as we can get to. So without further ado, let's look at the conclusion to this great sermon, the final words of Jesus spoken in the Sermon on the Mount as recorded for us in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 24. "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and its collapse was great." So I would submit to you that in a sense, Jesus, before we even read this passage today, had already concluded his teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. What we have here is a teaching about what we are supposed to do with the teaching. That Jesus is saying, now that you have heard my sermon, now that you've heard what I've had to say, you need to respond. Jesus has covered a lot in this sermon. He's talked about things like this is how we treat one another. He's dealt with the subject like sexual purity and marriage and giving and prayer. He's covered a large range of things, and now he's saying, this is what you need to do with it. If you're taking notes, write this down. Jesus did not put forth ideas to be considered, but commands to be carefully followed. That Jesus did not put forth ideas to be considered, but commands to be carefully followed. And whether or not you follow his commands will have significant ramifications on your life. I don't think I really need to come up as a pastor with an illustration this morning because Jesus concludes his sermon with an illustration of his own. He's saying that there is a man who is building his house, and this man builds his house on a firm foundation. He builds his house on the rock. There's another man who is also building his house. Both men are building, but they choose different foundations. The second man builds his house on the sand, and when the storm comes, when the wind blows, when the floods rise, one house is going to stand, one is not. Jesus is making this claim that those who hear my words and put them into practice is like a wise man who is building his life on a foundation that will stand. The ESV Study Bible notes this. It says, during the hot summer months, the sand around the Sea of Galilee was hard on the surface. And the Sea of Galilee is the region where Jesus is giving this sermon. But a wise builder knew that he needed to dig several feet below the surface to the bedrock in order to establish the foundation for his house. Hear me, your life is like a house. It has a foundation that you have been building on and continue to build on. And this is true whether you laid the foundation of your life deliberately or not. We're going to be a little bit more technical today, a little bit more philosophical today. If you're a coffee drinker, you should have had your coffee. And I'm going to sit for a moment while we chat. Listen, you have some ideal, some goal, some philosophy, or some theology that is the foundation to your life. The foundation, I would say, is the largest voice in your inner world when it comes to your decision-making process. It is the primary lens through which you view the world. It is your worldview that facilitates your answering of what you perceive to be life's biggest questions. Questions like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do with this life that I have? How am I going to live? And you might have given these questions a lot of thought. You might have wrestled with these in a dark night of the soul. You might have remembered really digging into these questions in college, in philosophy. These might be the questions that you try to drown out with constant noise or infotainment. But these questions might linger. And you might be able to precisely articulate what your worldview is and why you have adopted it. Or perhaps you're not like the person I've described at all, and you haven't given your worldview a lot of thought, and you are guided by a less sophisticated yet perhaps equally valid worldview. I think I recall one conversation, and it just blew my mind because I was in a conversation with someone and it was taking a philosophical turn, and I asked them, I said, well, do you believe in God? And the person goes, I haven't thought about that. So there are people who haven't thought a lot about the biggest questions, but either way, there is some foundation upon which they are constructing their life. There's some foundation upon which you are constructing your life. And this is very important for us to understand. And let's dig a little deeper. Let's flesh this out a little bit more. So some worldviews start with a big sort of philosophical idea or question and then move downward to the practical. Big philosophical questions like, does God exist, for example? And if he does exist, what kind of God is he or she or whatever? Is he powerful or not? Is he omnipresent or not? Is he good or not? Does he care about what we do with our lives or not? If he doesn't exist, then it would seem that we humans are at the top of the proverbial food chain, so to speak. And if this is true, then we can safely conclude that there is no purpose or moral code imposed on us from above or outside our world. From here, one might say that life is utterly meaningless, while another might say we get to create meaning. One might say there is no such thing as morality, while another might say we get to create and define morality for ourselves. But understand how these questions are answered will shape a worldview, laying a foundation, I believe, for the shaping of one's life. Craig Groeschel would note that our life is always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. What you believe will impact how you live. Another way, perhaps, of saying this is what you think will be the foundation of your life. And that's true whether your thoughts are complex and well-developed or whether they're simple. Either way, they're going to lay a foundation for your life. And if that is true, then we should passionately want to get the foundation right. If it is true that what you think is going to lay a foundation for your life, well, let me tell you, you want to get that right. I want to get that right. So there are the kinds of questions that a more complex worldview deals with, but as I said a moment ago, not all worldviews do in some sense. Some people don't start up here and move down, but they kind of start down here in the practical sense, and they don't move at all. These are the folks who declare a solution without solving a problem. So remember when you were in math class in middle school, high school even, you likely had a math teacher who would give you an assignment and say, not only do you have to come up with the right answer, you have to show your work. And it was annoying. And you had to do that, and you had to work your way through not only to the solution, but also show your work. And there are some people who have kind of come up with a worldview or a guiding principle to their life, and they haven't really showed their work, but it's still a guiding principle nonetheless. These are the people who say things like, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And it's not a very sophisticated foundation, but it's a foundation nonetheless, and it's where happiness matters most. I am here for my happiness. Hedonism at its finest. The primary question for this individual will be, what will make me most happy? It will also be the primary decision filter through which they make decisions about their life. What will make me most happy? I want to live where I will be happy. I want to work a job that will make me happy. I want to marry someone who will make me happy. And if that person that I wanted to make me happy doesn't make me happy, I will divorce that person so that I can be happy. You see how this works? In this system, happiness is God, and God has the loudest voice in the room. All this to say, everyone is building on a foundation. You are a builder. look at your neighbor and say, "You're a builder." It's very quiet. We're like whispering it in here. Look at your second choice and say, "You're a builder." All right. Each one of us has some worldview, some grid, some goal that is foundational to each of our lives. In Jesus' illustration, both guys were building on a foundation. The guy who's built his life on the words of Jesus built his house on the rock. It was a foundation that was going to work and a foundation that was going to last. Jesus then communicates this idea that anyone who hears his words but doesn't do what he says, it's like somebody who's building their house on a foundation that will crumble. It will not last. And I want you to just think of the magnitude of such a claim. This is a very big claim. It is an either-or claim. It's not multiple choice. It's not like, hey, when you go out to construct your life, here's a menu of choices. There's A, B, C, D, all of the above. No, it's A or B. It's either or according to Jesus. Jesus is saying, follow my words, base your life on my teaching, and your house will stand. Ignore my teaching, and when the storm comes, the foundation will not be strong enough to hold. Listen to my words and obey me and be wise. Listen to my words and ignore me and be foolish. This is an enormous claim for somebody to make. And these kinds of claims understandably make us uncomfortable, do they not? Because the idea of an absolute authority telling us what to do, that just feels a little intense. Like we might have preferred if Jesus stood up and gave a TED talk, right? Like, here's some of my thoughts. I've kind of crafted it in such a way that you could listen to it and absorb it. But here's the reality, that you can kind of come to a conclusion yourself on whether or not you want to listen to what I have to say, but that's not the way Jesus presented his material to us. He didn't present it as some TED talk or a well thought out point that's submitted to the marketplace of ideas for your consideration. He comes to us as one speaking with authority. And when we concluded what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, at the beginning of our time together, we finished what Jesus had to say, but if you notice, we didn't actually finish the chapter. There were two more verses that were present for us at the end of chapter 7, and I'll read them to you now. They're kind of easy to miss. Like when Jesus stops talking, it's kind of like, okay, sermon over, we got it. But don't miss what the last two verses have to say. In verse 28, when Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching. For he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. Let me read that again. When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their own scribes. There was something different about Jesus. Jesus finishes the Sermon on the Mount, and the people who received that sermon, who heard that sermon, they're like, what is this? This is different. This is not what we are used to. And the text even says it. It even distinguishes. It says, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. So perhaps what they were used to is somebody more like me. Like, please understand, when I come on this stage, I am not here on my own authority. If I just start telling you what Connor Neigenfind thinks about how you should live your life, feel free to leave. I don't think that's very valuable to you. I mean, I might be right on some stuff, but it's not authoritative. But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus didn't get up on the stage and kind of leverage his opinion or say, you know what I think, or here's what I believe, or here's what scholar so-and-so said about this to substantiate his claims. I mean, when Jesus stood up, he spoke as one who had authority, and people were astonished. And so I want you to feel the weight of this, because I think some people engage the words of Jesus like they engage the words of Confucius. It's like, oh, he's a respectable person that a lot of people have listened to. Maybe we should consider what he has to say. And just understand that that's not what Jesus was doing, nor was that what the original audience of Jesus heard. What the original audience of Jesus heard was, at bare minimum, that guy thinks he's an authority. A lot of them, by the way, believed he was. So understand categorically, Jesus isn't someone who's just merely submitting his thoughts to the marketplace of ideas and you can evaluate whether which ones you want to pick and choose. He's like, it's either or. It's either or. And some people might object at this point and be like, okay, I get what Jesus is saying, but am I just supposed to take that on faith? Like, am I just supposed to just blindly take it on faith? Like, Jesus said he was an authority, and he's telling me how I need to live my life, and he's making this very radical claim that if I base my life on him, it's going to stand. If I ignore what he has to say, my life will end up crumbling. Like, am I just supposed to take that on faith? And if by faith you mean following someone without reason for doing so, then no. But if by faith you mean accepting what someone has to say because you perceive them to be a credible authority, then absolutely. And understand, this is how faith works. It's not blindly following someone without reason. It's saying, I believe this person is an authority, and so even when they're speaking on things that I don't understand or maybe don't even make sense to me, they're the authority, I'm not. And understand that this is just how knowledge works so much of the time. So C.S. Lewis, in his well-known work, Mere Christianity, that I would highly recommend to you if you haven't read it, notes this. He says, believing things on authority only means believing them because you have been told them by someone you think trustworthy. 99% of the things you believe are believed on authority. I believe there is such a place as New York, he writes. I have not seen it myself. I could not prove by abstract reasoning that there must be such a place. I believe it because reliable people have told me so. The ordinary man believes in the solar system, atoms, evolution, and the circulation of blood on authority because the scientists say so. Every historical statement in the world is believed on authority. None of us has seen the Norman conquest or the defeat of the Armada. None of us could prove them by pure logic as you prove a thing in mathematics. We believe them simply because people who did see them have left writings that tell us about them, in fact, on authority. And this is his whole point, so pay attention to the last line. A man who jibbed at authority in other things, as some people do in religion, would have to be content to know nothing all his life. A man who jibbed at authority in other things, as some people do in religion, would have to be content to know nothing all his life. Hear me, no matter what you believe, no matter what worldview you have adopted, you believe things based on authority, and so do I. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is how the knowledge world works. that we believe things based on authority. And some people will object to this. Some people will object to this and they'll be like, no, man, I only believe science. No, you don't. Unless you are just endlessly conducting scientific experiments in your basement, you do not only believe things based on science. In fact, when people say this, they might even be referencing something they learned in the 7th grade from a teacher, which means, listen, you don't believe stuff based just on science. You believe stuff based on what people have told you about science. Oh, and in addition to that, if that's not enough to convince you, please understand that when we say science, we're not talking as though every scientist is in full agreement on all things that you refer to as science. So please just stop the charade, cut the crud, and let's just be real. You believe stuff based on authority. I believe stuff based on authority. And if we didn't base stuff on authority, we would not know much at all. This is how the knowledge world works. And so what differentiates the Christian worldview from other worldviews is not this idea that we take stuff on authority. The difference is that Christians believe Jesus to be a legitimate authority. Do you? Understand that this is very logically consistent, by the way. Everyone is believing stuff based on authority. Christians believe Jesus to be a credible authority. Question is, do you? And if you don't, I have a favor for you to ask of you. Would you just answer one question for me? If he's not an authority, who is he then? Because if you're going to dismiss his authority, you ought to have a reason why. So my question is, if Jesus isn't an authority, then who is he? What is he? C.S. Lewis, again, would lay out for us 3 options in a famous passage from this text. And here's what he says. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and call him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. Here's what Lewis is saying. These words have been synthesized in this way, that Jesus is either a liar, he's either a lunatic, or he's Lord. Liar, Jesus was evil. Jesus knew he was not who he claimed to be, and yet claimed it anyway, intentionally deceiving other people. Option A. Option B, Jesus was not a liar. He was not intentionally trying to deceive people. It might be hyperbolic to label him as evil, but he was out of his ever-loving mind. He thought he was somebody he wasn't. He thought he was the Messiah. He thought he was the Son of God. And he went around claiming to be, because Jesus was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Option B. Option C. Jesus is who he says he was. And if Jesus is a liar, and I'll leave you with this, and we'll wrap up. If Jesus is a liar, do not follow him. If Jesus is out of his ever-loving mind, he's just a madman, claiming to be someone he was not, please do not follow him. But if Jesus is Lord, the Son of God, who left heaven, who came and took on flesh, who lived a sinless life, showing us what it meant to be human in the fullest of ways, ultimately going to the cross to die a substitutionary death because God loves people and was willing to pay the penalty of sin, which is death, that we deserve, took it upon himself, and Jesus rose from the grave, triumphing over death and over all that is evil so that you might have life. If that is true and Jesus is that Lord, follow him with everything that you have. Build your life on that foundation. And if you want to know more about what that means or what it means to follow Jesus, there's going to be people around after the service. Come find us, come connect with us, send us an email. The prayer room's open. Just let us know how we can serve you. For the rest of you, Edgewater Alliance Church, I love you. And until next time, may you think like Jesus. You're dismissed.
Thank you for joining us today as we journey through what it means to think like Jesus so that we can live more like him. If you'd like more information about Edgewater Alliance Church, its various ministries, or how to partner with us through giving, visit our website, edgewateralliance.org. Until next time, blessings.